Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
The Chinese Communist Party seems to have a thirst for controlling foreign power grids. Over the past 2 decades, the regime invested hundreds of billions of dollars in critical companies around the world, the same companies that control other nations' power grids. An energy network under Beijing's influence is now taking shape, but controversy is growing about the risks tied to Chinese money. Beijing's shopping spree started in the early 2000s. That's when the regime began buying stake in major energy companies across the globe. At first, the purchases were kept small, but later started to grow, expanding Chinese control of the companies. On top of that, Beijing has been known to give out loans to developing countries. After partnering with another nation, China often sends its own companies overseas to construct projects there. This also boosts its foreign influence. To build its energy network, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has relied on a handful of state-owned power companies. The largest include the State Grid Corporation of China, China Southern Power Grid, and the Three Gorges Corporation. Among them, the State Grid Corporation is the most powerful. It's one of the world's largest electricity companies. The massive company keeps close ties to both China's defense and intelligence agencies. Its leadership is also made up of Chinese Communist Party members. To understand the CCP strategy, we first have to understand how we get electricity. First, power plants generate electricity. Transmission lines then transport it to different regions. From there, distributors deliver it to our households and businesses. The CCP has appeared to focus on a certain step in that process: companies that transmit and distribute electricity across different countries. There are several examples. In Southeast Asia, China State Grid Corporation owns a 40% stake in the NGCP. That's the company that runs power lines in the Philippines. It serves almost 80% of all households in the country. In South America, State Grid controls over half of Chile's electricity market. It seems to have targeted the country's largest electricity distributors, completely buying one of them out and purchasing over 95% stake in another. But it doesn't end there. A different Chinese company also has a 30% stake in Chile's largest power transmission system. Nearly the entire country relies on its service. In Brazil, power distributor CPFL controls 14% of Brazil's electricity market. 80% of its stake belongs to State Grid. On top of that, Beijing also owns 12 smaller distributors. Chinese companies also have a significant presence in Europe's electricity market. In Italy, the country's national power grid is controlled by a holding company. State Grid purchased stake in that company in 2014 and now holds over 30%. In Portugal, China's Three Gorges Corporation is the biggest shareholder of EDP, the country's largest electricity producer and distributor. Three Gorges later tried to eat up the rest of the company's stake, but failed. On top of that, State Grid holds a 25% stake in Portugal's power grid operator called REN. China's state-owned companies have similar footprints in Malta, Luxembourg, and Greece. Beijing's march into the Western energy market now raising alarms. In the UK, controversy is sparking over a joint construction project where China helped build a major nuclear power plant. Security experts warn the Chinese side could build backdoors into the plant's computer systems. Those could allow Beijing to shut down Britain's energy production at will. And it's not just the UK. A Senate session in the Philippines has revealed similar concerns from some lawmakers. They say Beijing could shut down the country's power grid remotely. In Belgium and Germany, authorities blocked Chinese bids for stake in major power companies, citing national security concerns. In Australia, State Grid now owns over 40% stake in the power company Electranet. It's the only electricity transmission operator in southern Australia. State Grid also tried to buy stake in Australia's largest energy grid, Ausgrid. But then Treasurer Scott Morrison blocked the deal, saying it was against the country's national interest. A China affairs analyst says the risk of Chinese money comes with Beijing's ambition to lead the world order. To this goal,
中共的话，它是没有任何底线的。
The Chinese Communist Party has no bottom line. Among its strategies is one called unrestricted warfare, which means the party can use any person, investment strategy, or technology within its control to achieve its purposes. It has no legal or moral bottom line.
Qing says the regime can utilize and even weaponize its domestic companies quietly and without notice. If a Chinese company owns significant stake in a power grid company, it then gets a say on major decisions.
比如设备上来讲，
For example, whether the company should use Chinese equipment or technology.
什么样的一些相应的一些技术。
He adds that this could also give China backdoor access to that company's power grid. But on top of the Chinese regime's far reach, there's another concern. Beijing has a history of aggression, especially toward any perceived criticism. Australia-China relations stand as one of the most recent examples. Beijing recently slapped a number of tariffs on Australian goods. It was widely seen as retaliation after Australian officials called for an independent investigation into the origins of the pandemic. Outside the West, Beijing's reach also extends to a number of developing countries. That's including Ethiopia, Egypt, Brazil, Pakistan, Laos, and Burma, also known as Myanmar. China is building or has built power grid-related construction projects in all of them, like power transmission lines or substations. Ultimately, these deals are all part of China's massive infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative. Aside from power grid deals, the regime is also financing and building critical infrastructure across the globe, like ports, highways, and railroads. Critics of the program say it's part of how Beijing gains influence over other countries' lifelines, and through this, slowly builds influence to counter the West. Shifting the world order from Western democracies to its own communist control appears to be the motivator behind the Chinese regime's extensive shopping list. Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.